Partnered by Times Influence.
Very fantastic edition of a special discussion spotlighted on digital disruptors, those who are changing the digital entertainment landscape. This is organized by Z5 in partnership with etbrandequity.com. I'm your host, Shaili Chopra, the founder of She the People, and truly delighted and excited about all the changes that are happening in the digital entertainment industry. What's driving them and where do we go from here? I've got a very fantastic panelist joining me right now here. I'll start with the introduction of Siddharth Banerjee, who's the CRO and CMO of Games 24/7. Amit Gupta, the Chief Business Officer of Zapper Media Labs. Vikram Sakhuja, Group CEO of Madison World, and Tarun Katyal, CEO of Z5 India. You can be sure that these four people here do have deep insights on what to expect from the entertainment world, and more importantly, how the crossroads of digital, i.e. tech and entertainment, are going to play out here on. Vikram, if I may start with you, how is it all looking at just the way entertainment has come to embrace technology in such an intrinsic way, and the experiences have gotten personalized? You know, the kind of scale that we had thought digital should deliver is finally showing up. Tell us about your big picture thoughts.
India is going to be in line for some really serious media consumption growth as far as consumers are concerned. And if you have to look at it, on average, if you take overall India level, maybe about 4.5 hours of content is consumed on a per capita basis, and most of it is TV. Now, amongst the people who are online, they are consuming it about 3.5 hours, out of which content around is half an hour. So if you have to actually start looking at even the cohorts like young kids or the young adults in urban metros and all the rest of it, where the sort of consumption is the highest, even they are only watching about 8 hours a day. If you go, or if they've got 8 hours of media, if you go to the US and some of the more developed markets, it's going to 12, 13 hours. And obviously this is concomitant. So you're watching TV, you also have this in your hand, and so on and so forth. So I think there's going to be a huge headroom for growth. Content is going to be consumed, and it's not going to be one medium getting extinct at the cost of another. It will be coexistence of a lot of them, and OTT is going to be bang at the center of it.
Okay, so that looking at the evolution of digital platforms itself, that journey has also been pretty intense and a very, very sharp learning curve. Just reflection into how you see it.
Consumer behavior is fundamentally changing. How much of that will finally kind of result in a little bit of a more sustainable change, yet to see. But interestingly, things that were not really on the mainstream have become mainstream today. Let me give you 3 examples. The first is when you thought about education, you thought about classroom education, and now it's quite okay to think about online education at scale, and you are seeing the revolution in edtech. When you look at entertainment and prime time hitherto used to be one screen, and now you can think about prime time actually on your mobile phone on a host of platforms, including OTT. When you think gaming, the first thought that occurs to you is that it's meant for the young folks. But what we have seen in gaming in particular is that it's now mainstream. Interesting consumer behavior changes occurring, and technology and the fact that there is now multiple use cases across industry is aiding some of those consumer behavior changes, including in gaming.
Okay, that's interesting, and we'll have a little more perspective from Amit as well as he ties some of these thoughts down. But Tarun, what is your viewership telling you, especially let's say in the last 8 months?
So I think you need to triangulate 2-3 things, right? One is the need for broadband at home. And that this whole entire work from home and the entire middle class of this country has had to invest into. And the other thing you must see is that the cost of smart TVs, right? It's cheaper to buy a smart TV than a smartphone in the country today. And the entry point smart TV now is at 7,000 rupees. So you can actually have smart TV plus broadband put into your household very, very quickly. And then you look at cost of OTT. The cost of OTT has also dramatically come down, and most OTT platforms like ours and some of the others have also invested over the last 18 months in building platforms for smart TVs. So one thing that was, a universal phenomena that people watch a lot of digital video on their mobile and so on and so forth, is now very rapidly progressing to becoming a TV first phenomena.
Okay, Vikram, just to tie in sort of the willingness of the consumer, do you really think that the lockdown post-pandemic, or rather the pandemic itself, has led to a complete transition of the way the consumer approaches all the platforms, use of digital and tech for entertainment? Would you say this has been a pivot, Vikram?
It's been a catalyst for further growth. It's what was existing beforehand, and people have just had to get that much more onto more online on everything which they do, including commerce. And content also is picking up. But if I have to look at the growth in TV has been more than the growth of online consumption, because there was some Bark and Nielsen kind of studies that we used to see on a weekly basis. And clearly the uptake on TV was more than the uptake on online content. That said, of course, it's happening. Now, let me just give, I'm a true believer in everything that is OTT, but I'm also, like I said, in the spirit of coexistence, there are certain areas where a TV will continue to be, will prevail for forevermore. Starting point is something called, the minute we talk about on demand, and it's a very personal viewing, and I think just hold the thought on what Tarun said on smart TVs, because that is going to address one issue. But right now, everybody is very personalized and using their own stuff, own device when they're watching a particular program on demand. I think the power of TV lies in tribal moments. So tribal moments are when the entire world and their uncle is also watching a particular platform. When the Prime Minister did his Thali moment, Diya moment, everybody was tuning on and you could actually talk about it the next day. Those things can't be replicated on your personal device. The IPL that you see or a Super Bowl equivalent that you see will always be consumed more on a TV, and even a large breaking news, whatever else you might say, will happen more on a TV platform if it's like the way we're talking about. So tribal moments, I think, are going to be important, and TV will always own the lion's share there. So, and the third one is, and I'm right now jumping ahead of myself, I think the game has to be played from a business standpoint on advertising more than subscription. On subscription, while I would love it if it's more on subscription, but if you have to pay, guy has to pay for his broadband, if he has to pay for a cable or a DTH, and then if he has to pay for one or more OTT players, it gets to be a pretty heavy price tag. So somewhere along the line, they're going to, like in the US, there are markets where people just take the digital platforms, the OTT, and they don't subscribe to cable. But I think it's going to be a while before that comes here. So for these three factors, I also feel TV is going to exist.
So, there is more to discuss on the advertiser subscriber and the story of where things will go here on. But I want to bring Siddharth back into this conversation and know, Siddharth, whether you've had a similar experience in terms of device use, in terms of advertising on gaming. And if I may ask you to add a little more perspective on what kind of audience, regions did you see? Did you see sort of an uptick? Earlier, Tarun mentioned demographic, and not necessarily looking at millennials alone, but much more, sort of older demographics as well. So that would be good insights for us.
Some of the foundations actually have been laid a couple of years back. And so therefore the momentum has been there for a couple of years, of course, amplified by some of the lockdown periods that we witnessed in more recent quarters. And we were sitting yesterday, a bunch of, e-commerce leaders, and we were talking about how the consumer in India has been influenced by literally the 4 C's, which have been enabling factors for the internet ecosystem. And the 4 C's are essentially that of carriage. And we spoke about the price of data and the price of devices, including smart TV devices. So carriage, commerce, content. Tarun spoke about content, not only, let's say, for Z5, but indeed content that's coming through in the kind of content that people want, different vernacular streams, content of different genres, etc. And content, not only from an entertainment perspective of OTTs, but also content like gaming content, content which is educational in nature. And finally, the fourth C, which is capital. The fact that today there are investment houses who are interested in this uptake of digital mediums by consumers in India. So commerce, carriage, content, and capital. That then therefore means, let's say for an industry like gaming is, and I mentioned it, that it's become much more mainstream. So if I had, for assumption's sake, 100 consumers today, that has got amplified into varied demographics across the country. And that means that I'm able to, harnessing the power of OTT at one end and television on the other, reach out to many more consumers for our gaming platforms. So that's one big change that has happened. So gaming is now mainstream. And the second thing is, because of the 4 C's that I just said, this can also be seen, 2020 can also be seen as literally a takeoff year for gaming in India.
Amit, no doubt everyone here talks about the relevance and the importance of technology in, sort of catapulting digital entertainment. But I'd like you to kind of spend some time on how all of this is coming together, and whether you're as optimistic as some of the others about, the kind of scale, speed, momentum likely to see, in the coming months.
Yes, absolutely. From a scale perspective, I think, yes, we've hit a very high number in terms of people who are consuming content. But if you look at 2 other metrics, which is the time being spent, and the second metric is number of people who are paying for content. I think these 2 metrics are going to be key for us to track going forward. Now, in terms of commerce, the point Siddharth mentioned, which is around the ability for the business models for players to work, because that is the only way the industry continues to grow. There, I think we have a massive advantage as a country. So you produce a content, and here it needs to be monetized over such a large population of viewership. So per person, the amount which needs to be paid for that content is seriously low as compared to a lot of other economies. And therefore, I think this demographic dividend which we have itself is going to drive a lot more content creation. And that is one aspect of it. The second aspect is the ability to monetize from advertisements. And there, for example, if you look at the profile and the viewership preferences are changing a lot. It's not a catch-up TV anymore. So people are not tuning into OTT to just catch up on what they missed on TV. There are specific preferences. 20% of viewers on OTT do not watch TV. 40% of viewers watch different content on OTT versus what they see on television. And then there are the other smaller buckets of maybe a 20-30% coming up for catch-up TV. And then another 15% who kind of watch something together with family on television, but watch a completely different thing otherwise. So content preferences, as per our data, are changing very fast. And that is where the monetization opportunities, even from advertising perspective. So these 2 coming together, I think, will be a big boost to business models and therefore to the growth of the industry.
So I actually want to ask you about that, because of late you've been talking a great deal about media measurement, right? And in that context, do you think we're getting closer and closer to a more, I would say, more sort of a formula that's beginning to work at various counts? Because you yourself said media preferences are very, very reflect a little bit on the ad tech piece, and then also, leveraging the whole advertiser piece.
If you look of this ecosystem from a brand's perspective. From a brand's perspective, I want to get my message across to my end consumer. And so far, television has been the key platform because it gives me that mass reach. Now, with the onset of OTT, and especially during the lockdown with the consumption going up, as a brand, my objective is still the same, but the channels have become multifold. So how do I reach out to that user in the best possible way? And there is a need for data there, data to connect television and the digital ecosystem to be able to tell you this particular consumer of yours is watching television at this time of the day, watching this particular OTT content at this time of the day, comes back with the family to watch television at this time. So therefore, if you as a brand want to reach out to him, this is how you should spend your money. So there is a need for technology to connect television and OTT for advertising to become seamless across the two media. And there's certain things, for example, 20% users, I said, are not watching television anymore, but they are on OTT. Those are direct consumers for brands to monetize and kind of reach out to on OTT platforms, because there is no way they can reach out to those users on television anymore. And there are others who, for example, watch only sports. So if you are trying to deliver your message, it is imperative that you spend on television as well as on OTT to be able to get that consumer to see your message enough number of times. So I think there is technology and data, which is kind of trying to bring these two layers together and give a wholesome picture to the brands to deploy their marketing spends.
Sure, Vikram.
Yeah, I have a point of view on that. I think it's the technology that Amit talks about is very impressive, and I think serves a very good purpose. But before we even get to that, I think it's very important to have an industry-wide currency for measurement of online viewership of any kind. Today, the problem that lies is that because we don't have a like TV measurement has a currency, it's called BARC. Print readership has got something called IRS. But however, when it comes to online, we seem to be having a bunch of either people presenting their own data logs. There is a myriad of sources from where you get the data. Now, the crazy part is if I take 3 pieces of data, I can actually get plus minus 300% variation in the kind of viewership which has been ascribed. That high. Today, if I have to pay bills, and for TV, we used to have something called third time monitoring, which used to monitor third-party data of all the channels. And we always used to pay our bills based on third-party monitoring and not the channel logs. And it was only after 5 years of validation and 99.9% accuracy, we said, yes, it makes sense to move to channel logs. Today, if I look at a third-party measurement, and if I look at the bills that we have to pay as per the publisher logs, there's a 30% variation. Now, all this is not doing it's doing a disservice to the OTT players, because right now there is a whole lot of confusion and lack of credibility on what the numbers actually are. So I think you can start saying, okay, TV guy, is he watching OTT? When does he come back? All that is really nifty. But I think you've got to get to a very basic level of viewership before that. So according to me, in my data, and it may not be completely correct, but I believe that of all the video viewed, not more than 20% at a rep audience basis is online. For amongst people who are right now seeing both TV plus online, maybe 25% of it is coming through online, 75% is still through TV. But I'm sure if I go to somebody else, he'll say 90% is coming through OTT and only 10% is coming from TV. I get that. But nobody has gone and told me that there's a representative sample which is representative of the universe, and this is why this number makes sense. So I think right now measurement is the big elephant in the room.
Siddharth, how is the scenario for the gaming space? Is that far more, are you able to make that a lot more quantified when it comes to potential viewers as well as advertisers? Maybe add one big challenge that you see going forward.
I think the challenge has already been spoken about in the first part, which Vikram and Amit referred to, which is the holy grail of cross-media measurement, and therefore to get a common currency. And I think that exists for all of us. But the second part that Tarun spoke about, which are tools that, by the way, we are using with Z5 as well, as we plan with them in a dynamic way. That's something that's, I think all of us have to reskill ourselves on. So I think there are two parts to, therefore, the measurement challenge that we have. In terms of gaming, your first part of your question, at Games 24/7, actually, science of gaming is the DNA. So everything is actually, in a way, researched with data, piloted with some hypothesis backed by experiments, and then validated by, which path is showing more promise. So it's actually very data-led. And in gaming in particular, I think the interesting bit is that all our actions are actually led by a deep understanding of player behavior using machine learning, and then translating that into MarTech tools that we use to, and to pick out a word from what Tarun spoke about, to get the right cohort with the right message in a dynamic way. And so if there are solutions that today OTT platforms are looking at as a self-serve basis, that's very welcome, because it will plug into our dynamic requirements as advertisers, looking to reach the right cohorts at scale, including in vernacular for messaging which is most relevant to a wider mainstream of consumers in India.
Well, I think that really does cover a lot of issues. I think one of the big pieces here is that there is a big opportunity, provided it comes with the caveat of having enough ways to measure as one looks at this post-lockdown scenario and the surge in digital consumption. And to Vikram's point that while it's all great to see everything that's happening on digital, let's not forget some of the traditional media is making a comeback, and how in terms of keeping up its eyeballs. I do appreciate you all joining us, looking at all of these spaces. Thanks very much. Digital transformation for the entertainment industry. Keep an eye out for that.
Partnered by Times Influence.